Thank you. Thank you so much. So as the slide says, visit Michigan Cider Mills. And it begins here in Rochester right around Labor Day. So we're just after Labor Day. Some opened before, some just opened Labor Day weekend. As announced, my name is Michael Dwyer. I am a local writer, former radio broadcaster, and I want to thank Rochester Hills TV for filming this tonight. Started a little early. Let's refresh. Who's been to the cider mill, cider mill this year? Throw out a couple names. Yates and Rochester. Anyone else? Okay. So who I am, I'm a travel writer, journalist, cider mill enthusiast. These are the two websites that I write for. What is a cider mill? This is the long description that Wikipedia offers, and pretty self-explanatory. It's the location or the equipment used to make cider, hard cider, applejack, which is a version of apple cider. Goes into the whole production, and of course we use the term as the location as well. But what we really do is go there for cider and donuts. So the cider mill offers fresh pressed apple cider, which is different than apple juice, which is what you get in a grocery store, isn't anywhere near what apple cider is. And the warm batter-made donuts. I've asked every cider mill I've visited, why donuts with cider? Nobody knows. Some say because it's easy for dunking, but that's the closest to an answer I can get. Of course, we go for other baked goods such as pies and breads, muffins, turnovers, old-fashioned candies, jellies, jams, preserves, fudge and ice cream some of them have, and of course the produce. This is an interactive presentation, so anytime you have a question, throw it out at me. How do you make cider? Has anyone, when your visits to cider mill, gone and watched the process? Okay. It's really, really, really exciting once. But every cider mill does it a little different, so it's worth checking out when you go to the different ones. We'll kind of go through it. Pretty easy. Apples are picked. The bins and bushels are used to transport it. That's usually on trucks.
I have a question. What kind of apples?
Very good question. They use red, yellow, and green ones. Cider is usually made from a blend of apples. They want to try to get a nice acidity level. So they will have sweet and sour. Typically this time of year, what's available? The tartar apples. So if you go now, you'll notice that it's a little on the tart side. Many people like that. It starts to get sweeter as more full-bodied apples become available, and they start blending them into the cider. And toward the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, it's really sweet. And that's what most people look forward to warm up and put on the stove for kind of a spiced mulled cider effect. So once they get them to the cider mill, some of them already, they're very close because they're orchards. Cider mills such as Middleton, Goodison, Rochester to a degree, bring in a lot of apples. They go all over the place to find them. Most of them are Michigan apples. Sometimes, like 2 years ago, some had to go out of state. Do you remember the, about 3 million bushels were produced when normally we do 20 million bushels in Michigan. And it bounced back because last year was 30 million. So they send them through a washer, which is really just cold water and brushes, taking off any residue, pesticides, something like that. And then they grind it into the pumice, press it, treat it, which could be ultraviolet light or pasteurized, and then bottle it for you to take home. This is Goodison Cider Mill. This is out back. This is them sending them through the washer. They sort them, check for any brown spots. Most of the time they're pretty good apples. You just cut out anything that looks like rot. That's very few apples in this process. They go through the washer and up the little conveyor belt. Like I said, they're all a little different.
How about the stem?
The only thing you don't want is leaves. Stems are fine. So you're not making tea, so you don't want the leaves. You're making cider, so you want just the apple. This is, I believe, Yates in their sample of pressing. So these are sandwiched press cloths, 7 layers, hydraulic press, although I think Yates is still water powered. Press it, and about, that looks like 80 gallons to me. Does that look like 80 gallons to you? And here's Westview Orchards and their bottling system. So here is a nice list of different Michigan apples and what they're good for. They're all good for eating. Wash them, eat them right off the tree. Some are better for baking. Northern Spies are typically sought after for baking. Honey Crisp are good for anything. They're very similar to the Gala or Fuji. Empire and Jonathan's are also very well-balanced apples that are good for almost anything. Anyone out there a big apple pie baker, so they know what I'm talking about? Okay. Northern Spy. And these are red, yellow, and green. So, what's a presentation without a joke? When you go into the cider mill, typically the first question a person asks is the cider pasteurized? And I always wait for the cashier to say, no, it's just up to here. Okay, that's the only one, so don't worry. So treating cider, we had that question about the different types of treatment. There is the way Rochester Cider Mill does it, which is completely untreated. Some people think that it has to be pasteurized, and I ask them, do you pasteurize your apple before you eat it? So it does have to be refrigerated. Pasteurization buys you a little more time before it goes bad. UV treating a little less time, and untreated the least amount of time. Your true cider enthusiasts love the untreated. And that may be filtered or unfiltered, and that just takes some of the sediment out. And like I said, they all do it a little different. Pasteurization, heat it to 160 degrees for a few seconds, then it's cooled right away. It's the same process as milk. It breaks down the pectins by heating it, and so you lose some of the color and some of the flavor. UV treated, the ultraviolet light treated, is kind of the middle of the road best option that a lot of mills are going to. Yates converted over from heat pasteurization to UV treating a few years ago. Goodison did it a few years before that. Middleton, I believe, UV treats. So it's not heated, it uses a light to kill the bacteria. It's FDA approved. It's considered the equivalent of pasteurization as far as being safe for everyone to drink. And it does not change the color or the flavor. So 2,500 varieties of apples in Michigan, or in the United States. A little over 200 in Michigan. Only the crab apple is native to North America. Colonists brought over the apples in the 17th century, and we mentioned the mix-up of presentations with the Blue Cross Blue Shield. Here is my healthy comment. Apples, as well as cider, is fat-free, sodium-free, and cholesterol-free. So very healthy for you. Natural sugars, of course, so you have to be aware of that. A bushel weighs about 42 pounds, and 36 apples make 1 gallon. You usually get 3 to 3.5 gallons out of a bushel. Here's something the Michigan Apple Committee put out. 9.2 million apple trees in Michigan, over 850 family-run farms. 30 million bushels of apples last year, and that we're going to be close to that this year. Normally we're about, well, they have an 18.7, I wrote it up to 20. And we're second largest in the United States as far as states that produce. I think Washington is first. And with last year, we outbeat New York. And it's not up here, but the United States is the second largest producer of apples, second to China. So Johnny Appleseed was a real person. It was John Chapman. He really did exist, and it's one of the reasons why we have a lot of varieties of apples in the Midwest and throughout the United States. As he threw his seeds, that's not really the best way for cultivating apple trees. So they were not really great apples. They were a step up from the crab apple. But the colonists at the time just made hard cider with it. The term cider, we think of what we think of here in the United States. Cider overseas, especially the UK and Europe, that's what they refer to as hard cider, if they just say cider. So going to the cider mill, there's over 100 in Michigan, and I can't find a state that has more than us. So. The cider mill, going to the cider mill, the experience is very Midwest. You'll find it on the East Coast and you'll find it in the Midwest. But Michigan really does a nice job with them and promoting them and making it an experience and a destination. It's just very unique to us. And if anybody's from another state, let me know how I stand on that fact.
My children live in Colorado, and I know they don't have anything when they come here. They're all
That is the number one complaint freshmen college kids have, is that they're not near a cider mill when they go to school. At least that's what they tell their parents. So here are the 5 locations in the Rochester area. Yates Cider Mill, and they have the new location at Canterbury Village.
Oh, really?
So they've taken up, we used to be the Christmas store up there. So they're not going to press there, but they're going to have all of their product, and they're going to be baking and making donuts there. And that opens in a few days. Of course, we're very familiar with their busy location. And Goodison Cider Mill, Rochester Cider Mill, Middleton Cider Mill, and the Paint Creek Cider Mill. For fun, I put some well-known ones near Rochester. So Yates Cider Mill. I hesitated putting it first, but that's what most people recognize and remember. So these are my photographs. This is a weekend line. There's always a line at Yates. It's a very clean, well-run cider mill. They've got lots and lots of things to do. They have lots of parking, wonderful scenery, trails, the Clinton River, and lots of traffic where those 3 roads come together. It's kind of what you have to go through to get there. But once you're there, it's a perfect place for couples, families. They've got the fudge shop and the ice cream shop, and they just add more and more as the season progresses. And if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. So if you're only going to go to one in Rochester, it's probably where you want to go. But if you've been there, then maybe you want to try something else. Goodison Cider Mill is now blue. It used to be green for years and years, and a long time ago it was red. They do UV treat it. Yates does UV treat it as well. This is a very easy in and out. There's a lot of older people that go in, local people that stop. It's on the side that Baldwin Elementary is, so people head north home. They get a lot of traffic in the afternoon. People going the other way stop at Paint Creek in the morning. So it's hard to believe that there are two cider mills just a quarter mile apart from each other. They do have a small play area outside and some activities on the weekend. If you do have family and kids, Sundays are probably the only day you're going to have a really good time there with lots to do. They are close to the Paint Creek Trail, but it's a little bit of a walk to get to. Not as convenient as Paint Creek. Any questions on Yates and how they do things, or Goodison? Yes?
What is the age of Yates?
50s is when it started as a cider mill, I believe.
Well, last year was their 75th anniversary on the water tower, so they're 76 years old.
So yeah, 1950s, or would it be just before that, 40s? Oh, you know what?
I read they're trying to make it a national,
1863, but I don't think as a cider mill, as a mill. They've done different things there. So Rochester Cider Mill on Rochester Road, just north of town. They're the only ones in the area that do the untreated. So the Truest out there had their. What's really nice about their untreated cider is that they do blends. And I highly recommend that when they hang the sign out there, or if you go on their Facebook page, they will post when they're doing a variety blend. Blueberry, grape, cranberry, peach, they're wonderful. It's just like juices, any variety of juice that you buy in the grocery store, its core, no pun intended, is apple juice. And then they add the flavor. So they won't give me the exact formula, but how many grapes to apples, but it's mostly apples, and the different fruit just add the flavor change. They do have this, and that's why I put this photo in. They have a collection of old farm tools and instruments, and if anyone is interested in that, that's kind of a fun thing to do. They do have a little play area out in front, but it's very much like Goodison. It's a quick in and out, get the good product. They have a lot of apples and produce available most times.
good donuts.
They do.
My favorite.
Yeah, that's your favorite donut? So Middleton, has anyone been to Middleton? Just out of the outskirts of Rochester. I included them. They used to have tons and tons of orchards, but then real estate for houses was a better deal, so that all got sold. So now they purchase their apples, like most of these cider mills do, from the big orchards out in Romeo and north of here, and they still press it the old-fashioned way. I believe they also UV treat. They do candied apples really nicely. And there's not many that do the candied apples. They all have carameled apples. But if you're looking for a place for good candied apples, Middleton has them.
Why did those go away? 'Cause those are hard to find.
Candied apples?
Yeah.
Their shelf life really isn't that long, so
Because of the red candy they put on the outside?
that's what I've been told. It's the process does not hold up for very long. Carameled apples use Granny Smith apples, which will last probably years. So refrigerated, a carameled apple using a Granny Smith apple will last a very long time. Well, when you refrigerate apples, they last 6 to 10 times longer than on your counter. So they keep very nicely chilled. Paint Creek Cider Mill, who's been there? So they're not really a cider mill anymore. Although if Ed, the person running the place, was here, he'd probably correct me on that. He does have a small hand press. And he does do small batches of his own cider. Unfiltered, untreated, very natural. It's good. But it's a small press, and so most of their cider is from Blake's. So if you go in there and you just ask for cider, you're probably going to get Blake's. So ask if they have any of their own. That is a lease. So they are renting that space, and in the past dozen years, there's probably been 3 or 4 different entities running it as a cider mill. So, yes?
Just in my humble opinion, last year, I went to both Yates and to Paint Creek, and Paint Creek had far superior cider. It was wonderful.
Time of year could have mattered.
Okay, so you liked what they had. So if you had some of theirs, then I can understand that. If you had the Blake's, then your palate is probably more toward the pasteurized cider.
Okay, I think I had Blake's. I didn't ask for any.
So what they're doing over there as well is a restaurant. So they're serving lunch and dinner. They have an ice cream shop. They're very close to the Paint Creek Trail, and now that that bridge is open on Orion, we can get to it. They got a great big parking lot, a wonderful covered porch, and it's all on one level. It's very easy to get in and out of. So if you're traveling with anybody that has some walking issues or is in a wheelchair, that's a really nice place to go. So to find out about all the other ones, Michigan.org is a nice resource. As I said, there's more than 100 cider mills in Michigan. Go to their website. There's a tab that says Play, tab down to Attractions, and then you search under Farms and Mills. Then you pick a city. So if you picked Rochester, a couple dozen would come up within, and you can change it by radius and how close you want to get. So if you know you're traveling somewhere during cider mill season, anywhere in Michigan, great resource to go to. Click the city that you're going to, see what's in the area. You're going to get all of the farms as well as the mills, so you kind of have to sort through it. The Michigan Apple Committee puts out some of these statistics every year. So this is their official estimate for 2014, 28.74 million bushels. I only have 3 or 4 apples on my tree, so I don't know what happened. But to compare it, last year was 30 million, 2012 was 3 million, and a normal crop is 20 million bushels.
What happened in 2012?
Several freezes in a row. Right. Yeah, we had that warmer weather in April. Everything started to bud, then it chilled off, and we had several freezes. One knocked out a few buds, but we had several in a row. So I know that all of the cider mills were scrambling to get apples from other states, from here in Michigan. Rochester Cider Mill traveled to other states. Yates traveled to other states. Goodison was able to use all Michigan apples. So did you know there was a Michigan Apple Queen? A couple people do. Okay. Kind of a fun little trivia thing. Elizabeth Wittenbach is her name this year, and she works on her parents' orchard. That's part of the rules, is you have to be connected to the industry somehow to be the queen, and she attends Michigan State University. And there she is, representing Michigan apples. Were we able to get a technician to, no, okay. So cider mills are really fun for all ages. Walking trails, hay rides, haunted attractions. Hard cider. Blake's is now doing hard cider. Has anyone tried that? Hard cider. 21 and over. You can. They have a tasting room, and I have not been there yet, but I've been to other cider mills that offer that. You have some wineries that are now doing hard cider because they're set up for that. And hard cider can be between a beer and a wine, depending on how they do it.
Question on hard cider, is the process that created, milk-created hard cider different than the hard cider I have that turns hard? In other words, it's not really spoiled, but it's hard.
Yeah, the process is different.
Okay.
You know, the old way of doing it is you could take a gallon jug, leave it sit out, and when it starts to bulge, you turn the cap a little quarter turn, relieve some of the pressure, let it bulge again, and keep doing that. You can add sugar, although it's got pretty much a lot of sugar in it. Citrus is something that a lot of people add, lemons, limes, oranges, to give it some flavor. If you do want to make hard cider, you cannot use pasteurized.
Right.
You have to use the untreated or the UV treated. So cider mills are a destination. People go there to do so many things. Great for children. They have the corn mazes, bounce houses, petting farm, pony rides. They have the hay rides, and then they also have some adult hay rides in the evening that include a bonfire and that sort of thing. Of course, it's Halloween season as well, so many have turned into having those corn mazes and haunted attractions. Blake's has a haunted attraction, yeah. Was it scary? Okay, good. So I have some tips for visiting a cider mill. I probably should jump down to the bottom first. Try to find the answers on their website before calling. They're very busy, and some of them don't even answer the phone. But you do want to find out some things before you head to the cider mill, depending on what your goals are. So call ahead and ask when they press cider. Goodison does it on Saturdays and Sundays, depending on demand. Of course, I don't know when Paint Creek does it because they do a little hand pressing. Not sure when Rochester does it. They were doing it today when I picked, so Tuesday might be a day, but it might be again on demand, especially with something like cider when you have a shelf life. You don't want to do it too often. Blake's, every day. They're high production. You want to find out what time the activities are. If it's raining, there are probably not a lot of them going on. So if you have kids that are dying to be in that bounce house, call it. What form of payment do they accept? These are still some of these old-fashioned businesses that don't know what a credit card machine is. And I'm okay with that, but many of them don't. Goodison accepts credit cards and debit cards. Rochester does not, but they have an ATM inside. Yates takes everything. I believe Middleton is just cash. And that check thing, people still write checks, and most of them take them. Sure. Depending on your needs, ask if they have inside or outside eating facilities and if they're covered. Allergies are very popular, and for lack of a better way of saying it, it's a concern that many people have. You're probably not going to find a lot of cider mills that avoid all of the allergies that are out there. But if you have a concern, I would call and ask. Parking, and then people with mobility issues, you might want to know, because there's not sidewalks everywhere. These are orchards, and you can picture them. So Questions on any of the local cider mills? Yes.
What is the UV treated? I must have missed that.
So it's an ultraviolet light that radiates any of the potential health hazards like E. coli out of the cider. Now, most of the time you're perfectly safe drinking cider, but for the state's purposes, it cannot be resold unless it's pasteurized or UV treated. So Blake's, pasteurized, they sell to other places. If you go to your grocery store, you'll find probably High's cider available. Those are pasteurized. Rochester Cider Mill does nothing with theirs, so they cannot sell to anybody else. That doesn't mean that it's unsafe. That's just the rules. Yes?
What does it do to make apple juice versus apple cider?
Well, apple juice is pasteurized, filtered, and there may be preservatives added to it, sugar added. Cider, it's fresh and right there.
The juice diluted.
Well, I'm sure everyone has had apple juice,
Yeah, I mean, it's
and
not,
if you've had apple cider, then that tells you exactly the difference. Yes, sir.
How long do they allow between the last time you spray the trees and you pick up the apples for?
One more time?
How long do they allow the period? 2 weeks, 3 weeks between you spray, the last spray and the trees?
I don't know when the last spraying is before. Most apple trees are sprayed to prevent disease in insects.
That's right.
It just has to be done. There are very few all-organic treatments and apples out there. You will find some organic ciders and some organic juices. They're typically twice as much. But I think it's on demand. Every couple weeks they spray. It also depends on how much rain we've had. And if we have rain, then there's more bugs. If we have rain, it washes off what's there.
So how do they wash really the apples? Preparation for.
Right, so they go through this conveyor belt system with lots of brushes on it, and there's water spraying in, and that just rubs off any of that residue. Then they're ground up. When they're UV treated or pasteurized, then that will take care of anything that got through all of that. So I don't think no matter how the cider is treated in Michigan, I don't believe there has been any illness from drinking cider. I may be wrong, but that's what I have found.
Where's Blake's?
They have several locations. Romeo is one of them. Armada. They have 3 or 4 different outlets. So it's, yeah, straight up Van Dyke. Westview, Stony Creek, also in the Romeo area. Valerian is in the Romeo area. Yes.
Which ones allow you to pick apples?
U-pick is a very popular activity, yes. So Stony Creek has, I believe, a U-pick. Miller's Big Red, Blake's, and pretty much any orchards north of here. And that goes, and many of them are growing other things because they're orchards and farms. So when the time is right, then you can go get your pumpkin as well. I heard a couple cider mills during the 2013 issue were dropping bins of apples out in their orchards as a way for you to go pick out of the bin. So they were still trying to give you the experience. They're all businesses, and they do a great job of what they're doing, and so I would never say anything bad about any of them. I believe they all have something unique to offer. So if you were to go to Rochester Cider Mill, I would say go there for their flavored blends. That's what you go there for. If you go to Goodison Cider Mill, pistachio nut bread. That's what you go there for. If you go to Paint Creek, I highly recommend an apple cider milkshake. Vanilla ice cream, apple cider, does a great job of blending it up. It's very rich, but he does a nice job of blending it. Very good. That's at Paint Creek.
And the slushes are good too.
And many of them are doing the slushes as well, which might be better with hard cider, but I haven't tried those yet.
Repeat where you get the candied apple.
That's at Middleton. So if you go to Middleton, that's where you get the candied apples. So we're still continuing with the questions.
Mike, when is the peak time? Is that towards the end of this month? And when does the season kind of end?
It's kind of weather permitting, but I find that the last 2 weeks of September are very busy. We tend to think of October as the cider mill month, but you ask any of the orchards out there on when they're busy. Of course, Sunday is the busiest day, and it reverses backwards through the week. It's all weather dependent. If it's 75 or 80, no one's going. They're doing something else outside. If it's 42 degrees, they've kind of given up trying to stand in line at a cider mill. So 50s and 60s, bringing up the crowds. They want to have that nip in the air for warm donuts. Cold cider, hot cider, slushy cider, or if you go to Blake's, hard cider. Yes?
Connoisseur of cider, do you love it that much, or are you interested in the history of that, or?
I'm interested. I've been to a little over 20 different cider mills in Michigan. I want to try to get to all over 100 of them. They come and go a little bit during economic times, of course. Something like Paint Creek may become a full-fledged where they press it there in again, maybe not. I have worked for cider mills in the past, full disclosure. I've had some time at Paint Creek and Goodison. And I write about cider mills every year, so I interview all of these folks and try to get people to go out and have a good time at the cider mill.
Are you you were published for a newspaper, or who do you write for?
I'm freelance, but you've probably read articles in the Oakland Press, the Macomb Daily, Community Lifestyles, which used to be Suburban Lifestyles, Rochester Media, I write weekly for, and they put out the Community Edge, and then anyone that's willing to pay me. That's how freelance works. So I enjoy them. I think cider mills are just a very unique experience. As I was saying, we seem to be blessed here in Michigan by having more than most folks have. And same with haunted attractions. Same time of year, a little different experience. But we have more haunted attractions in Michigan than in other places as well. So,
Did you ever think of writing a book about the 100?
there's a gentleman named Jim Parker who has written a book on cider mills in Michigan. It's probably more than a decade old, so it's dated. But yes, is the short answer to that. I won't give you all my ideas, but yes.
When do they usually close down, after Thanksgiving, or?
So they're all different. Yates will post when they're closing, and that's usually a couple days before Christmas. It depends on how that last weekend before Christmas falls. Goodison is open 7 days a week till Thanksgiving, then goes to weekends only, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, till Christmas. Christmas Eve being the last day that they're open. And the owner is in there wrapping Christmas presents for his family and having a few adult beverages. So that might be the best time to get your last minute deals.
Got the hardest
Pain Creek is open year-round because they have the restaurant and the eatery there. They have cider and they have donuts year-round pretty much. But for some reason, and the yummy donuts that we go to the cider mill for, right? Probably one of the worst things we can eat. And the cider is some of the best things we can drink. So, right. And maybe that's why they go together. You feel better. Yeah.
I'm from the far east side, and it was a treat. We used to go to Yates when I was a little girl, and when I was in the Girl Scouts, and we would meet some Boy Scouts and take the hayride at Yates. And it's just a history, and none of this, nothing was built up at the time. And how many other people here had the history of Yates? Okay, just
Yeah,
the
most
children, yeah.
folks have a memory of going to Yates. Rochester Cider Mill used to be owned by Sargent's. They're now owned by the Barkums. Barkums used to own Goodison. It's now owned by the Steinheisers. And Paint Creek has had several different owners when they were the big restaurant and the bar. Anybody go there for dining? Yeah, everyone has great stories about the Paint Creek restaurant. Sunday brunch. I hear all these stories about they did. I never got a chance to try the restaurant, but thankfully they still have a retail space there, and there is the cider mill experience.
Have you ever frozen cider?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether it's how it's treated. It could be untreated, it could be UV treated or pasteurized. What you want to do is take just a little bit out for expansion and freeze it.
And it's just as good?
You got about a year. So I've taken it out after a year, and it still is very fresh and cidery, but it tends to be flat. It tends to get a little flat. It's good, but it doesn't have that spunk that it did when it was brand new. But 6 months after, you don't notice a difference. So load up your freezer. Yes?
When you were employed at the Goodison Cider Mill, is that the time that they made a movie at the Goodison Cider Mill?
Sort of. Yeah, I had a connection with them then. So the movie Highland Park was filmed at the Goodison Cider Mill. It was called Lucky's in the movie. And the staging area was Paint Creek, oddly enough. Bo Derek was in that movie. And not Mel Gibson, but the other one from that series. Normally I'm better with movie trivia, but I'm on cider mode tonight. So they took absolutely everything out of the mill, brought in all their own props. We somehow got some of theirs, and they probably have some of our stuff left. But for the most part, they took down all the signs, and it was called Lucky's in the movie. I have not seen the movie because it didn't have a theatrical release. That was 2007, maybe, and it was released just a year or two ago on DVD through Tribeca Films. And many of you might have that channel on your on-demand. So take a look and see if you can find it. I've heard that it's hard to get all the way through the movie. But I have not seen it, so I can't really say.
Why is that? Why can't you get through the movie? It's a bad movie or good?
They say that it's boring. That's what I've heard. So, it's called Highland Park. It's based on a group of school teachers that play the lottery, and they're from Highland Park. Highland Park, Michigan, yes. And they play the same numbers every week. And the guy that buys the tickets goes on his vacation up north to the UP and goes into this Lucky Cider Mill. There's not one cider mill in the UP, by the way. But you know how Hollywood is. So He sees one of these little fortune-telling machines. It gives him new numbers, so he plays new numbers as he always buys the tickets for the group of school teachers. Well, guess what numbers come in? The numbers they normally play. So they all think they're big winners. And that's the movie synopsis of Highland Park that was filmed at Goodison Cider Mill and staged at Paint Creek.
Just for that reason, they might have it here at the library.
They may.
Do the cider mills bring in any appreciable tourist trade, or is it kind of like our own secret? Yeah, I moved here from California and people started talking about cider mill, and I don't know what you're talking about.
In my experience, I don't know if they bring in giant tour groups other than some bus tours, some of those day trips, like they go to casinos and things like that. Most people plan their visit home to Michigan at this time of year. Besides the fall foliage and the wonderful scenery that you can get, and Michigan is really one of the prettiest states out there, if not the prettiest state. Why not come home when you can get cider and go to a haunted house and see all the fall colors? Yes.
Watch the Blue Derry movie.
More questions? Yes.
Which mill has the pistachio bread and which one has the blends again?
So Rochester Cider Mill does the blends. They don't do them all at the same time. They'll hang a little sign out by the road. And they have 3 driveways there because they kept expanding. So when you go flying past, if you see the blueberry sign hanging there, then you have another 1 or 2 driveways to try to catch it. So slow down, look for the sign, if it's there, pull in. The grape and the blueberry are wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So,
And the pistachio bread?
the pistachio nut bread is at Goodison Cider Mill. Yates does a whole variety of baked goods, and I can't complain about any one of them. Middleton has the candied apples. They will all give you a tour and tell you how the cider making process happens. It's best to call ahead and find out when that pressing day is. And they're all a little different. Yates is a bigger operation, as most people know, but Rochester, Middleton, and Goodison all have a very similar type of press. So you go back, we see the sandwich type layers that get pressed in together. Some of them rotate around so they can load up one as one is pressing. Some slide, so they're all just a little different. Most of the local ones here will bottle by hand. They just turn the tap on. And that's my favorite way, if you ever are there when they're pressing, see if you can get a cup right out of the tap. I know that Bob at Goodison, the owner, he thinks that it needs to sit a day so that it builds up some body. But I think that fresh, not refrigerator cold, just chilled enough is the best way to drink it. Some people like it room temperature. They'll go home and they'll just set it out. You don't have the shelf life when you do that because it needs to be refrigerated, but it depends on how fast you drink it. Yes, sir.
What's the best variety for cider dressing by McIntosh of upstate New York?
McIntosh is a very it's soft. It's a good apple. It will bruise if you look at it funny. But it's in almost every blend because it's a well-grown apple. It's well balanced, and they'll use it in everything. Right now, you're going to find ginger golds, Ida reds, Paula reds. In a few weeks, you'll start seeing the more bodied apples like the Jonathans, and then later you'll see Honeycrisp, Northern Spies, and they'll have the Delicious, the Gold Delicious, the Red Delicious. So the holiday cider that many of the cider mills will put out for Thanksgiving and Christmas is usually 100% Golden Delicious apples. Very sweet. I can't have a full glass and my stomach tells me I did. It's just a little too sweet for me. But late September, early October, I find is the best blend. Just one apple, I forget which cider mill it is, that does all Honeycrisp. Franklin might do an all Honeycrisp.
Is it good? Is it good?
They say it's just like biting into a Honeycrisp apple. You could just have a Honeycrisp apple then. But it's more pricey. Yeah, it's good. It's absolutely good. But with one apple, you don't have that blend and that balance. So you're going with whatever that apple is at that time. 3 to 5 apples seem to be the magic number, in my opinion. Different types of apples going into it. And I made the joke a couple times about red apples and green apples and yellow apples. But that's kind of the gauge that I look at, is you want to try to put in some reds, some yellows, and some greens. And that, right, it's the acidic level that you're trying to balance so that it's sweet but not too sweet, and it doesn't sit, so it sits well in your stomach. Let's put it that way. If you're looking for a really wonderful dining experience, Past Tense in Metamora, Past Tense Cider Mill, is a very good experience. They have wonderful meals, and you can order a full glass of cider with your meal. And that just seems so wonderful. They have fudge, and you can watch the cider making process, and they have a Christmas store, so you can do a little shopping. Past Tense in Metamora. Yes, sir.
What happens with all the mash, or I mean, all the Thomas, when they're done? Does that go to Tennessee for other beverages, or?
The orchards will spread it out into their fields as fertilizer. Very good fertilizer. Some of them sell them to hunters. It's that time of year, and deer love them. I think we should get all the cider mills here in Rochester to pull them together and just put a big line of going way out of the area. Just let all the deer follow it. So some Goodison dumps it just in their dumpster. They don't have the quantity to try to market. Some spread it out, some sell it.
Good question.
Are all these cider mills competitive as far as price or quality, or how's the fixing it?
Yes. Goodison always matches Yates for the price of cider. Goodison's donuts are bigger than Yates, so the price is a little higher. Paint Creek is higher. I think they're $9.50 or $9.75 this season for a gallon. They match their gallon to their dozen donuts, so that it's easy for them to figure, and a half gallon and a half dozen is the same price. No other cider mill that I've come across does it that way. Rochester's always the cheapest. They're $7 a gallon. Goodison and Yates is $8.50 this year. So during the apple crunch 2 years ago, it all went up about $2, and they're $9.50 a gallon. Last year they dropped it, because nothing ever goes all the way back down to what it was. But we have another good season, so I think most are running the same prices. So they're a little competitive. Some say they do a better job. Franklin, $12 or $13 a gallon. But if they have a captive audience. And they have their special blend of donut. So you go to Franklin Cider Mill, and you can have their donut, one kind. It's kosher because of the community. It's their own special blend. You're not going to find it anywhere else. Made here in Michigan. They have a nice dumbwaiter system, and up that dumbwaiter keeps cooling the donuts. They're always warm. I don't know how you put together a system that makes sure you always have warm donuts, but if you've had a warm donut, you're spoiled. You're never going to want a room temperature donut again. And so go on Sundays, wait in the line, get your warm donuts. If it's powdered sugar or frosted or something, of course it's going to be cold or room temperature. But the plain and the apple cinnamon and the cinnamon sugar donuts are what people just line up for.
You haven't mentioned once apple pie.
Apple pie is usually available at all the cider mills. And to make a good apple pie, just like the cider, use a blend of apples. So, I think Goodison does a good job with their apple pie. Yates does a good job with their apple pie. Rochester does a good job with their apple pie.
Those are good warm or cold.
Do any of them make applesauce?
Yes, but I can't recall which ones offhand do the applesauce. The bigger orchards are probably the more likely ones to do that. If you go up to Stony Creek, you're going to find a donut shop and then the inside area. And I don't know why applesauce is making me think this way. But the larger cider mills have a variety of booths. So if you go into Blake's, you got to wait in line for the cider, and then you got to wait in line for the donuts, and then you got to wait in line for the carameled apples, and you have to wait in line. So they have all these different lines that you can wait in to get the different product. That's one nice thing about the small ones that have less. There's only one line. You get all of it right there. Yes, sir.
Jack, you mentioned at the beginning, what's apple?
I'm not 100% sure, other than it's a similar version of hard cider. It's alcoholic. So, does anybody want to try cider now? Okay. Yes.
I would love to share the story with you. We have a friend who's a retired banker, and he always liked to go to the Franklin Mills when he was a kid, so he got a part-time job at Franklin Apple Mill. And then he and his wife retired to Florida, and he gets to fly out for to come home with all cider from Franklin cider mill. And there's donuts. Yes.
Yates does ship, as far as I know, and Franklin, I think, does as well. So the smaller ones don't, but the larger ones do. And so I have all three kinds of ciders that I talked about: pasteurized, UV treated, and untreated. And so, but I'm not going to tell you which is which. I want you to tell me what you think is good. You may? Yeah, I think so. I'm going to bounce this back to the beginning so that you can see the websites, if you want to jot those down.
How about the video?
We weren't able to get the video to run, unfortunately. And I don't know why. But I just stole it from the Yates website. It's about 3.5 minutes. So if you've ever been to their website, you may have seen it. It's a few years old, so they talk about heat pasteurization. They no longer do that. It's UV treated. But it's something the Food Network put out. And Mike and Katie Titus, the owners of Yates, are in that video. And it shows a very nice example of what happens at a cider mill. And since it was local, I thought I'd include it. But just go to yatescidermill.com to find it. And it's rochestercidermill.com and goodisоncidermill.com and paintcreekcidermill.net, I believe. There's a couple ones out there that one is old and one is new. I don't know which is current right now. Most of them have Facebook pages where they post what's coming up and what's happening that day. It's a really good way to see where you want to head for the day. And I would do 2 or 3. And other blog websites like Oakland County Moms, they do a nice job at reviewing them each year. You can, of course, go to Rochester Media and see my reviews every year. They're all nice. It gives you what you want to know about them: prices, hours, phone numbers, that sort of thing. So let's have cider.
Yeah.
Thank you.